Ahoy hoy, I'm Planet Walk, and I've come to realise that a YouTube channel that I can always count on to have wacky things to debunk is Mudfossil University. And in case you haven't heard of Mudfossil University before, much like PragerU, it is not a real university. It's pretty much just a guy called Roger that thinks that everything used to be living. And today he's taking something that kind of looks like bricks and says that that's living because of course he is.
This is so fabulous, I can't believe it. They are down like 1,000 meters in the ocean looking at things and have no clue really what they're looking at. They're doing the best they can. I'm not trying to demean anybody. I'm just saying I know what this stuff is. They're looking at it saying, oh, it looks like a yellow brick road. And, you know, I understand what they're thinking about. But anyway, we're going to go deep into this because I know exactly what this is, and you will too.
Oh, let me take a shot at this one. I think that it is rock that's underwater. There's no real reason to believe that it's anything other than rock that is underwater with an interesting formation on it. Although Roger is going to make some wild assumptions about it, obviously.
Alright, just to lay the cards on the table, I am going to claim that what they were looking at on the ocean floor was all of this stuff eroded away and these black balls laying on a surface which has patterns in it that look like a yellow brick road.
Oh, well, this is good. He's going with the line of, just because this looks like it's a yellow brick road, that doesn't mean that it necessarily is a yellow brick road. Which is obviously true for a lot of things. Just because something looks like it might be something, that doesn't necessarily mean that it is that thing. I sure hope that this logic, though, doesn't come back to bite Roger later on.
Okay, what we're looking at here is what they used to call the epithelium, and that has those black balls in it. You see these patterns underneath here? That is the layer of which I call a basement layer, is underneath this layer, which is now considered a new organ system called the Interstitium. And all of this stuff has eroded away. The black balls are laying on that yellow brick road.
Now, I'm certainly not an expert in biology, so I'm going to take him at his word for what he's saying. If he's getting things wrong, let me know in the comments. However, one thing that I do know is that usually when it comes to science, things are given names in order to distinguish them from other things. This is because referring to something as little black balls makes it very difficult to know what exactly you are talking about. Now, if you actually knew what you're talking about, you would just say what you're talking about rather than referring to it as a little black ball.
Okay, this is a geological survey that they're doing here, and they're saying it's a good dried lake bed deep in the ocean.
Yep.
Yeah.
They're at
Okay. Yeah, maybe let's go to the
1,029
right
meters.
just a little bit. It looked like it might have a chance of being a little
You see all the
bigger.
black balls?
It's
like you could just
Look at these, this crusty looking layer.
It's crazy how dry it looks at the bottom of the ocean.
Right.
Exactly, why does it look dry at the bottom of the ocean?
Oh,
See all the
wow,
black
yeah, that's
balls?
Not sediment. That's like
Roger, those little black balls are something that we like to call rocks. Or at least that is what it looks like to me, and is the most probable explanation for what they are.
What is
I
that?
feel like I'm looking
Atlantis?
at like
Yeah,
to Atlantis.
yeah,
The yellow brick road?
This is the yellow brick road.
Wow.
Yeah, can we get some still cam shots of this, please?
Yeah,
What is
get lots of them.
I feel like we're like out Mount Vesuvius, like excavating.
Right.
Yeah.
Now you see all those black
Cool.
balls?
Are you kidding? This is crazy.
They're all
It's like
crazy looking there, but
It's that one spot.
look around and you'll see a bunch of black balls. And you keep seeing all this little flaky, flappy patterns.
Roger, no matter how many times you point out those black balls, they're just going to look like rocks to me. And the part that he describes as flaky is just a different type of rock. This may be hard to believe for some people, but different rocks are made out of different materials and therefore look different and have different properties.
Okay, another day of fun at Mudfossil University. The Moki marbles. You see these things here? They are laying on top of a layer of tissue. And when I say tissue, I mean literally the basement layer of tissue. Above that is what they call the interstitium. These balls secure all the interstitial fluid bags. They just really discovered this. I've known about this for a long time because they're in my mud fossils. When they erode, the balls remain because they're hard.
So Moki marbles are certainly an interesting little oddity that has been cropping up in different places, and guess what? They're rocks. Although I suppose they're a little bit more than that, because I did Google them and found that their vibrations can help you balance your masculine and feminine energies. Spirit science, how did you get here? Gee, it really seems as though no rock these days is safe from healing crystal woo. But the thing is, there are geological processes that can explain how Moki marbles were formed. You don't need to explain them with whatever these little black balls are that you're talking about, that you still haven't said what exactly they are. For all I know, he could just be talking about the nucleus of a cell because he's just refusing to say what they're called. He also talks about how he's supposedly known something for ages that scientists have only just discovered. Roger, why didn't you publish a paper on it then? If you had have actually published a paper on it, then it would lend you a hell of a lot more credibility than what you have.
You see this? That's nothing more than skin and tissue that's eroded and left the interstitium balls behind.
That's just Moki marbles on sandstone. It's not skin.
All right, this shows basically everything. Up here would have been where the skin was. Then below that, there's this interstitium. I'll show you that in a second. The balls anchor all of the gooey stuff so your skin can slide around and then it'll come back to where it's supposed to be. All that stuff's gone now. The balls have fallen down extremely hard. You see that? That was the flesh. That was the gooey interstitial collagens and so forth that were in it, and it's eroded off into mud.
Genuine question. Roger, what do you think that these creatures were made of? Because what it sounds like you're proposing is that these things were made of flesh, like humans and other animals are. Because what it sounds like you're also proposing is that this tissue is somehow also rock now. Now, tissue can be fossilized, but it's incredibly rare for that to happen. But if Roger is to be trusted, then somehow it is happening all over the place, just everywhere. You know, and Roger is the only person that's figured this out. And yet, despite being the only person to figure this out, he still hasn't published a peer-reviewed paper.
You see this? You see this? You see this? These are all different places in your body. One of them is your esophagus, your stomach, your small intestine, your rectum. You see all these little protrusions and villi and so forth sticking out of them, and then these different layers of tissue. You're going to see this everywhere around the earth. Now, what happens is most of that stuff erodes, and even all of the stuff erodes basically. It turns into mud and clay and bloody, because there's a lot of blood and all that stuff. And what ends up is the balls that were in the epithelium, which is now called the interstitium. They end up laying on these layers down here, the basement layers.
Okay, so I have so many questions about that, but let's start with the fact that Roger hasn't read what he's looking at. And I know that Roger hasn't read what he's looking at because I have. Okay, I haven't read the entire book, but I've read enough of what Roger has shown on screen to know that Roger is talking complete bollocks. Alright, so from the screenshot we can see that we've got here the mucus tunic, and when we've got one, that refers to the epithelium, which Roger was saying is right here, because, you know, we've got a little one here, so this must be the epithelium. But he's wrong! You see, this is not actually the epithelium. You see, it may have a 1 next to it, but it also has a big solid 3 that's not in a circle. And when we go down to 3, we can see that 1 refers to the circular layer, not the epithelium. So this means that the epithelium, instead of being this layer here, is actually the layer that's all the way up on top. So because Roger has failed to identify that this is not the epithelium simply by reading the diagram, I very much doubt that he is correct when he says that the epithelium is also the interstitium. It's so hilarious to me that he managed to get it completely wrong. I'm not a biologist, but all I had to do was point out what the labels actually meant. This also supports my position that Roger has never published a peer-reviewed paper in his life, because to be able to publish a peer-reviewed paper, you need to be able to read first. Okay, so we have had a lot of fun with Roger's lack of literacy, but we do need to actually address some of his arguments here. So my question is, when he says that it erodes and turns into mud or clay or whatever, Does he mean erode, or does he mean decompose? Because erosion and decomposition are two different things, although I may be using decomposition a little bit loosely here. Because if it's erosion, then it's likely that it has been petrified. Now, I may be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure that petrification is what happens when you replace the organic material within something with minerals. And these minerals that are petrifying one part of it would be the same minerals that are petrifying another part of it. So if it's the same minerals, then why would one part of it be easier to turn to mud than another part of it? Now, if it's decomposition that he means, why did the outer layer decompose and then the rest suddenly get petrified? Now, it could just be that I'm an idiot, I'm asking the wrong questions. I'm not a biologist after all. But I don't think I'd get answers to those sorts of questions from Roger. Mostly because that would likely involve him having to read something. And we know how bad he is with that.
And that's what they're looking at in the ocean. They're seeing these basement layers. And you see these little stripes? You see them? That's what they're seeing right there. I don't know if you can see that or not. You see those little stripes? That's what they're seeing on the floor.
So the only evidence that Roger seems to have here is it looks like this thing, so therefore it must be this thing. I think I said something about that earlier.
Of the ocean. And they all have that. They all have a certain pattern to them. Because that's the way tissue grows. It has a pattern. Now, so I'm going to show you this, but this is all over the earth. It's these interstitium balls. You're going to see them in a second. They are the things that are right in here. And that's what erodes. When it erodes, everything lays down on this basement layer. The balls just never erode. They're tough. They call them concretions. They're not concretions. They are interstitial balls. I'll show you right now.
So he says that they're called interstitial balls. So I googled that, and I got pictures of balls, but not the sort that he's talking about. So I just really want to know what's the name of these balls that he's talking about. Because if I don't know, it makes it very hard to Google and verify what he's saying. And honestly, it does make it a little bit hard to debunk him. Oh, I see what he's doing here. If he actually said what these balls are, then it would make it a lot easier for people to call him out for it. Either that or he doesn't know what these balls are actually called. And if he doesn't know what these balls are called, then why is he talking about it as though he's some kind of expert on the subject?
One little last bit so you understand. You see these white layers? That's called a submucosa. You see it, number 2? Submucosa, 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 submucosa. And then you get into the interstitium, and then you get into the basement layers that they're looking at and thinking they're brick roads or so forth.
You know, for a second, I thought that he was about to get it. He pointed out that 2 said submucous tella, or however you pronounce that. But he didn't go down to where it said 3, muscular tunic, and then it says circular layer, which is not the same thing as the epithelium. He was so close to getting it, all he had to do was read a little bit more. I honestly don't know how you can screw up this badly.
Alright, this is the submucosa, which is, I showed you before.
So you know what would be absolutely hilarious right here? If it turned out that the mucosa and the submucosa are not the same thing. I did 5 minutes of Googling, and I was able to find that out. Because on lumenlearning.com, it says that the submucosa is a dense, irregular layer of connective tissue with large blood vessels, lymphatics, and nerves that supports the mucosa. 2 different things. So not only can he not read, because in his diagram it clearly says mucosa, but he doesn't even know that the submucosa and the mucosa are 2 separate things. My mind is genuinely blown right now as to how Roger can fail this badly. I don't know how he does it.
And then below that is the interstitium. These are the black balls that erode. This is really gooey, all floppy stuff, very, very weak. And it's pulley and twisty and everything, because that's the layer just below your skin and just below every organ. These are literally membranes. Underneath there's a couple different styles of layers that support this, which is the basement layer. And hold on a second, it's called, I think it's called the oblique layer and the laminar layer. I can't tell you what, but those are the brick roads that they're seeing.
How is he getting so close to getting things right for once, but still manages to get it wrong? I say this because he mentions the oblique layer right here, you know, where it says 3, you know, and then he goes on to say the laminar. No, Roger, please, just actually think about what you're reading for a second. Please. Like, you would think that after seeing 2 3s that are in circles, he would realise that these 2 3s refer to different things and realise that he has made a mistake. But no, he just gets confused about which 3 he's meant to be reading. You know, I'm actually starting to think that Roger might be more confused than Nigel Cheesy Hands. And that's quite the achievement.
Oops.
And all that stuff is eroded and the black balls are laying there. Now, in the desert and so forth, the Moki marbles, they're just almost perfectly round. In the ocean, a lot more interaction with salts and acids and moving around and, you know, being attacked by different organisms and so forth. Because some of this stuff is a little bit edible, not much, the black ones, but they do. Well, actually, I can show you, they are kind of edible.
Okay, I need to put out a PSA to everyone, just in case anyone is taking Roger seriously. Do not attempt to eat Moki marbles. Your teeth are not designed to bite those things, and I don't think that it's going to be very good for your health if you decide to swallow them whole either. So what I'm saying here is, they aren't very edible, do not attempt to eat them.
As I'm telling you, these are giant creatures, get ready, this is going to shock you. This is the basement layer. If all this eroded down, it would be nothing but mud. Agreed? Yes, agreed.
Objection, I did not agree to that. Do not try to put words in my mouth, Roger.
What would land down there? The balls, if they were hard enough, they would land down there. Agreed? Yes, I agree. What would be above? The mucosa? Yes, I agree. What would happen if it eroded? It would back down, and then the layer would be out right here, and all of these balls would be on there, the mud would be all on there, and we would see this pattern against the wall with the mucosa on the top. Do you agree? Yes, I agree.
Okay, I do need to apologise to Roger because I thought that he was trying to put words in my mouth. I didn't realise that he was just talking to himself. He did seem to be having quite a riveting conversation with himself though. I'm very confused what he means by the mucosa on the top, because does he mean that the mucosa has turned to stone, or where has the mucosa gone?
Well, let's see if we can find that. And ooh, look at that. There it is. This is somewhere over in England. Now, when I said these things are not invadable, look at them. They're being invaded like crazy. So that's why the ones on the floor of the ocean are not uniform. But the ones in where they didn't have a lot of continuous working on by salts and invasion by little, that is, there's some kind of growth on there. That is not them specifically. This is like, this is green stuff is growing on them.
That is because they're rocks. Now, I remember back in high school, for biology I think it was, going to a place near the beach. And there were rocks there that had anemones on them. As it would turn out, certain animals stick to rocks because rocks are quite common in the world. Just because barnacles and anemones stick to rocks does not mean that they're actually eating the rocks that they are stuck to. Because rocks aren't very nutritious. Do not eat them. Actually, let me take that back, because some rocks are okay to eat. Like this rock here you can eat, although it's just a bit of salt. If you're going to eat rocks, just make sure you only eat rocks that are safe to eat. That message is mostly for Roger.
And this is the mud that has eroded from the red fleshy part. And these are balls still in the walls. The balls are in the walls. And that is the mucosa, submucosa.
He's doing it again. He's confusing mucosa and submucosa, acting like these two things are the same thing when they're not. Also, I want to know the process for interstitium turning into mud and then turning solid. And on top of that, if what you're showing there is actually a creature, then I did some rough calculations, and that creature would have to be at least 1,000 kilometers tall. And that is a pretty big problem considering that flat earthers are wrong.
Yeah, these are the Mars blueberries. Mars is exactly like Earth. It was biological. Everything I can find was. Comets, meteorites, everything.
No, they are geological. If they were biological and you had such a gift to figure this out, then you would be employed by NASA. But you're not. Although you never know, maybe his next video will be an angry rant about how NASA just doesn't appreciate his genius or something like that.
This is the Mars Morse code. It's not weathered like it is here on Earth, but these are the balls. This is scrunched up together skin. I believe this is skin.
But your only evidence for that is it looks like this, so therefore it must be this. And that's honestly a terrible basis to convince people that your outlandish ideas are correct. It would be like me saying, well, the solar system is actually a living being because Pluto is a heart, the sun is the stomach, that's where all the energy comes from, the Earth is the brain because it's got sentient life there, and, you know, just make up something for each of the planets, because Pluto looks like it has a heart on it, so therefore it must be a heart. That would be a terrible basis to convince people on. Not to mention that the idea itself is just completely outlandish, and Roger, you better not take that idea and run with it.
I know more about rocks and about the planets and space and everything than anybody has ever walked the face of the Earth right now.
Roger, I can guarantee you that if you were to talk to any geologist out there, within 5 minutes of the conversation, that statement would be proven wrong. Especially if your understanding of geology is as bad as your understanding of biology, and let's be honest, it wouldn't surprise me if it was.
It's quite obvious. This is from NASA. This is the Mars crab, they called it, when they went way back to Curiosity. I followed this every single step of the way. That is an artery. These are all the little arterial vessels that run to support this muscle. It's right down here. This is all muscle sarcomeres. You see these breaks here? Those are muscle sarcomeres. And this blood is forcing its way into them to give it sustenance. All the rest is red dust, which they call it the red planet. It's red because it's all eroded, bloody body parts of gigantic creatures.
Okay, so there's a few things to unpack here. The first thing is something that I don't think that Roger has ever considered, and that is the logistics of massive cells. The reason why I say this is because as cells get bigger, they cannot work in the same way that smaller cells do. This is because the volume of a cell and the surface area of a cell do not increase at the same rate. Compared to surface area, volume will increase exponentially, which can be a huge problem. This is because all cells need material to survive, and that material has to go through the surface of the cell. And on top of that, not only does it have to get through the surface of the cell, but it has to get to the rest of the cell as well. So when cells have a tiny surface area compared to the volume, it makes it very difficult to get nutrients to all parts of the cell to ensure its survival. This is pretty simple stuff that you do not need a PhD in order to figure out. And he mentions Mars being red. Well, that's not because of blood, it's because of oxidized iron. That's it.
This is a rock that is actually got blood in it coming out of it. These are arteries. You see that artery over here? This whole thing was loaded, saturated with blood, and it all goes down into the muscle fibers. Now you can't see these fibers because the sarcomeres are so tiny, you need an electron microscope to see those tiny things. But you can see this is the pattern of muscle.
You know, it should be pretty easy to figure out if that rock is biological or a rock, just using a simple microscope. You don't need an electron microscope for that. Because I have looked at cells underneath a microscope, although I suppose he might say that, well, this is petrified, so therefore you wouldn't see cells or something like that. But even then, I'm sure that there's plenty of other methods that you could do on your rock to prove that your rock is not a rock, but is in fact something that used to be a living being.
Alright, this is great. This is History Mystery 2. Very good channel. Has a lot of good stuff. Always asking questions, and they're asking for some people to comment, and certainly Roger will comment. Now, here we go.
So recently I've been asking for ideas of stuff to cover, and the channel that he just mentioned, I had a look at it. And whoo boy is that a gold mine of pseudoscience. Now that is just going off titles and thumbnails, but it seems like the type of thing that would be interesting to cover in the future. It's also the kind of stuff that actually reminds me of the video that I saw from Mini Minuteman just a couple of days ago, so it'll be definitely fun to cover.
Watch this. This is very good.
Created. In the official reports there is one small sentence aligning with ET influences, however, as developments continue this sentence seems it may require elaborating upon. They have floated the idea that it could have been made by a volcano, but none have been found nearby. An impact made by a meteorite is the favorite theory, but no evidence of fragments has been found. Recent investigations have stumbled across something with a high iron content buried over 100 meters below the crater. The only official theory put forward so far is a meteorite impact. This seems like a cover-up, however, due to the lack of evidence to back up the claim.
So just because there is a lack of evidence for something, that does not mean that it's a cover-up. The video itself seems to be trying to claim that it's a UFO, but there is a lack of evidence for that as well. So does that mean that mystery history is trying to cover up the fact that it's actually a pimple? But I suppose that the pimple hypothesis has a lack of evidence, which would mean that because I put that forward, I'm trying to cover it up as well. So what is it? When you take this logic, each cover-up is just a cover-up for another cover-up because each cover-up has a lack of evidence. That's a deep rabbit hole that I don't want to go down.
All right, high iron content. That's, in my world, iron is blood, and that's exactly where all iron comes from, as far as I'm concerned.
What? Iron does not mean blood, let me assure you of that. In fact, iron is actually a relatively small part of blood because iron is a part of hemoglobin. And 1 gram of hemoglobin contains about 3.5 milligrams of iron.
Curiously is quoted by numerous sources as being alive and changes shape by rising and falling constantly. Trees nearby the site are reported to have grown abnormally fast.
All right, trees are growing abnormally fast. That is a sign of blood. Blood meal makes the trees or anything grow like just unbelievably fast. It's because it has all the transition metals in it.
So part of that is true. Blood meal can help plants grow. But saying that there is iron in this place and trees are growing fast near it, that does not mean blood. This is because iron does not have to come from blood. It's just an element that is found naturally all over the earth. But I think I'm done with Roger for today because just him by himself I could tolerate. But when he brought in mystery history, I think he was trying to eliminate the rest of my brain cells, and it is working. But before I end this video, there is one thing that I do need to say to Roger, and that is, Roger, you need to improve your literacy comprehension. And what better place to do it than at Planetwalk University? If Mudfossil University and PragerU can both be universities, then I can be a university too. In fact, everyone can be a university. Just a random person on the street, they're a university now. Congratulations.